Why was the silence louder when she entered? It wasn't the boots or the limp or the scars. It was something deeper, older, etched into her bones like memory. Fort Valor still breath fog when the recruits lined up, stiff with nerves, sleep. Barely behind their eyes, dirt clung to their boots. Uncertainty clung to their hearts. No sun yet, just shadows. Then she appeared. Sergeant Riley Dawson didn't announce herself. She didn't need to. Her presence hit harder than any introduction. Pale scars curved down her cheek like lightning frozen in skin. Another trailed her forearm, visible even under the rolled sleeve. And the limp? Subtle, permanent, owned. She moved past them like a specter built from war, discipline, and gunpowder. Private Jace Monroe couldn't help himself. Who let the zombie in? He muttered, lips twitching in smug amusement. Some recruits chuckled, most didn't. Not out of fear, but something they couldn't quite name yet. Riley paused, just long enough to catch his eyes, just long enough to let him know she heard. Then she moved on, not a word wasted. They didn't know her name, not yet, but they felt it coming. The commanding officer confirmed it minutes later. Sergeant Dawson will be your instructor. She's seen more combat than you will ever imagine. Listen, learn, survive. And then, they were alone. Her voice cracked through the morning chill, sharp, precise, a blade. I'm not your babysitter. I'm not your friend. I'm the wall between you and failure. Understand? Yes, Sergeant. The recruits shouted. Their voices trembled. She didn't. She ran them hard that first day. Bodies dropped, some vomited. Others cried when no one could hear. Riley didn't flinch, not out of cruelty, because she knew what it took to stay. Alive when everything fell apart. But Monroe, he kept his smirk. His jokes, he whispered about her limp, her scars. Bet she got those tripping over her own ego, he said one night. He wanted her to hear. She did. She said nothing. And that got under his skin more than any punishment could. Because Sergeant Riley Dawson didn't believe in bark without bite. She believed in something harder, letting the battlefield do the talking. And soon, it would. What makes someone stop laughing? For Jace Monroe, it wasn't a threat. It was watching someone do the impossible. Without flinching, the second week brought heat. George's sun burned without mercy. Skin blistered, muscles screamed, tempers simmered beneath every camo collar. Recruits were learning the difference between discomfort and despair. But Monroe? He still hadn't learned humility. Every morning, Riley stood in front of them. Silent, scarred, unshackable, she gave commands like they were law, sharp, simple, non-negotiable, and they listened. Not because she was loud, but because she wasn't. Because everything about her presence said, I've already survived worse than you can imagine. Still, Monroe couldn't stop himself. She limps like she's powered by WD-40. He whispered during roll call, elbowing the recruit beside him. A few forced chuckles, a few eyes downcast, but fewer than before. He thrived on attention, on being the loudest voice in the room. But the room had changed, quietly, without him noticing. It was during a forced march mile after mile through brush and broken terrain that everything began to shift. Most drill. Instructors stayed behind or barked from the sides. Not her. Riley carried full gear. She limped through the dust, soaked in sweat. Never slowing down, her scars, streaked with dirt and salt, looked like they were burning all over again. She's doing it for sympathy, Monroe muttered from behind. Wants us to feel sorry for her? But the laughter didn't come this time. Private Lewis, quiet as snowfall, snapped. Then why is she still at the front? Carrying twice what you are. Monroe scoffed, but something flickered in his face. Not shame yet, but confusion. He was losing his audience, because Riley never asked for respect. She earned it, one brutal mile at a time. That night in the mess hall, Monroe tried again. Y'all ever wonder what she looked like before she got melted? But she was hot. Forks froze mid-air. Riley stood behind him, silent. He didn't see her, but the others did. Private Monroe, she said. voice like cold iron. He turned stiff, swallowed. Hard. Yes, Sergeant. Finish your food. You're on latrine duty until further notice. She didn't yell. She didn't even sound angry. She walked away, and that crushed him more than any scream ever could. That night, he kicked his locker, slammed his boots, spat his frustration into the quiet barracks. She thinks she's better than all of us, he snapped. Just because she's got some damn scars. No one answered, because earlier that day, Lewis had overheard something, a whisper between instructors. You know who she is, right? That's Phoenix, Alpha 7, Kandahar. She pulled 3 men out of a burning Humvee. 1 died, but the others, she saved them. He didn't tell Monroe. Not yet. He didn't have to, because something about the way Riley moved the limp, the scars, the silence, it had already started saying more than any legend ever could. But Monroe? He was still trapped in illusion, still blind to the difference between volume and value, still thinking war was about noise, and what does it take to finally feel small? By the 3rd week, the separation began. The weeks started folding, to strong. Started rising, but not always the way you'd expect. Riley pushed harder now. Wake-ups came before the sun. Obstacle courses doubled in length. Gear inspections became relentless. She didn't scream much. She didn't have to. Her silence was worse, heavier. And when she did yell, it was like steel cracking in your chest. Most recruits hated her and respected her. Monroe still hadn't decided. He wasn't the worst physically. He could run. He could shoot. He had muscle and stamina. But mentally, he was fragile in ways he didn't even understand. He still thought this was about outshining everyone else, about proving he was untouchable. But he was already cracking. He just didn't know it yet. One sweltering afternoon, Riley stood in front of them at the base of a hill. It was known as Hill 40 degrees steep, jagged as broken teeth, used for testing grit. Endurance, pain tolerance. Riley's voice was clear and direct. You're going to the top. Then back. Twice. Full rucks. Groans echoed. She narrowed her eyes. I didn't ask for commentary. Then, move. Monroe took off like a bullet. Determined to be the first, to outpace her, to show her. Halfway up, the heat started chewing through his lungs. Sweat stung his eyes. The straps of his rucksack bit into his shoulders like steel jaws. He pushed, but by the summit, his knees were shaking. His throat felt like it was lined with sandpaper. He collapsed beside a tree, panting hard, and then Riley passed him. No pause. No glance, no words. She just walked past him. Again, she didn't stop. Didn't slow. He watched her. Her limbs steady, controlled, her back straight, her arms loose. She didn't even seem tired. By the time she reached the bottom and began her second climb, Monroe had barely stood. She's going again? Someone whispered. She didn't even rest. No one said it loud, but it spread like wildfire in the ranks. She wasn't human. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't doing it to prove a point. She was the point. Monroe grit his teeth, forced himself forward. Anger, now, embarrassment. Not at her, but at how easily she'd made him feel weak. He stumbled. His foot caught a root. He slammed into the dirt, shoulder first. Pain flared. Damn it, he groaned. Half growl, half whimper. Then her voice calm, crisp. You all right, Private? She'd come back up the hill again. Third pass. He sat up fast, pride bristling. I'm fine. Then get up. No softness, no sympathy, but no cruelty either. He got up, barely. Joined the others at the bottom, bruised, drenched, silenced. He didn't speak for the rest of the march. That night in the barracks, Monroe sat on his bunk, rubbing his aching knee, silent for once. Across from him, Lewis watched. You really don't know who she is, do you? Monroe didn't look up. What are you talking about? Lewis leaned in. Phoenix, he said. That's what they called her. Alpha 7, Kandahar. Monroe scoffed. You mean that's real? Lewis nodded, slow. She dragged 3 soldiers out of a burning vehicle. One was on fire, took shrapnel to the face. They thought she was dead. Silence. Monroe didn't respond, but something cracked. Deep, not from the story, from the possibility. It was true. He thought about her face, the scars, her limp, her refusal to shout, her refusal to flinch. All this time, he thought she was damaged. Now he wondered, what if she was still burning? The next morning, Riley ordered a simulated combat march. This is a pressure test. She told them, stay alert, stay together, panic, and you fail. Monroe kept pace, still sore, still silent. He was starting to watch her more than mock her, but old habits die hard. The march took them into dense woods. Speakers hidden in the trees played sounds of gunfire, explosions, shouts in languages they didn't recognize. Smoke grenades popped, a sudden bang. Recruits scattered, someone screamed, Monroe froze. Everything went gray. The fog, the sounds, the voices. It blurred into panic. His breath locked in his chest. He ducked behind a log, heart pounding in his ears. Then hands, scarred fingers gripped his vest and yanked him up. Move! Riley barked. She didn't wait. She ran beside him, dodging between trees, ducking fake gunfire. She kept him close until they reached the rally point. Only then did Monroe collapse, heaving for breath. I didn't need saving, he muttered. Riley crouched beside him. Good. Then next time, don't freeze. She walked away, but something in his chest didn't move. A crack, just a little wider than before. That night, the woods echoed in his mind long after the simulation ended. The sounds faded, the fog cleared, but the image stayed. Her hand, pulling him from the chaos. Her face, not angry, not afraid, just disappointed. He hated that look. He didn't know why it hurt more than the fall. At debrief, Riley addressed them. Half of you move like civilians, you panic, you scatter, you die. Her eyes landed on Monroe. This was a simulation. Next time might not be. She didn't name him. She didn't have to. Monroe clenched his fists. Later in the barracks, he threw his shirt at the wall. She acts like she's some war hero, he snapped. And we're all supposed to bow down to her? It was just a simulation. Lewis looked up from his bunk, calm but sharp. You think she acts like a hero? She doesn't even talk about it. Monroe glared. She saved me, big deal. I didn't ask her to. She didn't ask for scars either. Lewis shot back, but she earned them. The room went still. Then Riley walked in. She'd heard every word. She didn't shout. She didn't bark. She just looked at Monroe. You think this is about you? She asked. Her voice was low, but it hit harder than a bullet. You know how many soldiers froze just like you? Good people. People I trained with. 1 second of hesitation. That's all it takes. Her voice cracked. Just a little, not from weakness, from memory, from loss. You think you know what this is? It's not a game. It's not about yelling or punishment. It's about staying alive. When every part of you wants to run, for a moment, the air thickened. No one moved. Then she turned. You'll either learn what that means or you'll break before you ever wear a uniform in battle. She walked out, and this time, Monroe didn't argue. He sat down, slowly, quietly, his hands shaking, not with rage, with something closer to regret. He didn't sleep that night. The fog was still in his lungs, but now it wasn't from what breaks louder bones or pride. The next morning, Monroe was quiet. No wisecracks, no muttered jokes, just silence. He stood in formation like the rest, but his eyes were different, less smug, more searching. Riley gave no sign that the previous night had happened. No extra drills, no public humiliation. That wasn't her style. She led morning PT the same as always, ruthless. Unflinching, her limp was still there, but no one saw weakness in it anymore. Just rhythm, Just persistence. Monroe followed every command. No shortcuts, no sarcasm. When weapons drills began that afternoon, most recruits moved on after completing their reps. He stayed behind, alone, breaking down and reassembling his rifle, over and over, sweat dripping from his brow, hands trembling, jaw clenched, like he was trying to piece together something inside him, not just the weapon. From across the range, Riley watched. She didn't interrupt, didn't acknowledge him, not yet that evening. Lewis found Monroe sitting alone outside the barracks. Manuals open in his lap. "You all right, man?" Monroe wiped his face with his sleeve. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "That's all. I've got a lot to fix." Lewis gave a small nod. "She'll see it," he said. "She watches everything." And she did, because the next day, she tested him, no warning, no announcement. She just handed him a stack of fire team movement manuals. "You'll lead the next briefing," she said. His eyebrows shot up. That role didn't go to screw-ups. "Yes, Sergeant," he said, stunned, but not ungrateful. That night, he stayed up late again. Not to complain, not to vent, to study. He wrote notes, rehearsed lines, outlined movement patterns with a stick in the dirt beside his bunk. Riley passed once during her rounds. She didn't stop, but she saw. She always saw, but the real reckoning hadn't arrived. Not yet. It came the next morning. The intercom cracked to life over the base. "Private Monroe, report to General Coleman's office, immediately." Heads turned. Eyes widened. Monroe felt the floor shift beneath his boots. He wasn't in trouble, not officially, but a summons from the general wasn't casual. His stomach tightened as he walked, past administration, past guarded checkpoints, past doors marked restricted. Finally, he stood outside a large wood-paneled door. A stern officer opened it. "Enter." He stepped inside. General Coleman sat behind a massive desk, covered in medals and memories. "Sit down, Private," Monroe obeyed. "You've been under Sergeant Dawson's command for 3 weeks." "Yes, sir." "You've mocked her, disrespected her, undermined her authority." Monroe opened his mouth. "I don't want excuses," Coleman said sharply. "I want you to see something." He stood, crossed the room, and unlocked a cabinet. From inside, he pulled a thick folder on top, a flash drive labeled confidential. He inserted it into a nearby monitor. The screen flickered. Footage began to play, grainy, shaky, drone angles and body cam footage. A convoy, Humvees moving down a dusty road. Radio chatter, dust, then chaos, an explosion, fire, screams, metal folding in on itself. One soldier, already on fire, crawling from the wreckage. Another pinned. 2 more unmoving. Then she appeared. Younger, scarless, still Riley. But even then something in her eyes burned. She was bleeding from her scalp, limping hard. But she didn't stop. She screamed into her coms, then charged straight into the flames. One by one, she dragged them out. Her arm caught fire. She kept going. She rolled, crawled, pulled. By the time the last soldier was free, her entire back was blackened. The screen froze on a final image. Her body lying still beside the wreckage, smoke rising from her gear, unconscious, burned, broken, but alive, just barely. General Coleman stood beside the screen, his voice low. She flatlined twice before they brought her back. Spent 6 months in ICU, dozens of surgeries, skin grafts, nerve damage. He looked Monroe dead in the eye. Then she came back, not to sit behind a desk, not for medals, to train soldiers so they wouldn't die the way her brothers almost did. Monroe was frozen, throat tight, fingers trembling on his knees. Coleman stepped closer. Her call sign was Phoenix. She rose from fire. He paused. "And you mocked her." I didn't know," Monroe whispered. "No," the general said, voice sharp, final. "You didn't care to know. That's worse." Silence. Then, "She didn't report you. Didn't ask for punishment. But I'm giving it to you now, not with extra push-ups." With perspective, he leaned in, face close. Every scar she carries is a receipt for someone else's life. And you joked about them like they were decorations. Monroe swallowed hard. His eyes stung. Sir, I didn't mean. Coleman cut him off. You're dismissed. Monroe stood slowly, saluted, though his hand shook. He exited without a word. Outside, the sun felt harsher. The world felt heavier. He sat beneath a tree near the path, elbows on his knees, face buried in his hands. Shame wasn't loud. It was suffocating. When he returned to the barracks, the other recruits noticed his absence. He said nothing. He walked straight to Riley's office, knocked once. She looked up as he entered, calm, still, waiting. I saw the footage. Monroe said, his voice cracked. I saw you. In Afghanistan, I saw Phoenix. She didn't blink. I'm sorry, he whispered, for everything. She stood, walked to him, not angry, not cold, just still. You think one apology makes it right? No. Sergeant, he looked down. I just wanted you to know. I see it now. A long pause. Then she nodded once. Then act like it. He saluted and left. For the first time, he didn't feel like a victim. When does change start? Not with a speech, not with a breakdown, with the quiet decision to stop being who you were and start becoming who you're meant to be. The next morning, Monroe was the first one up. Long before reveille, before the sun, before the routine, he stood outside the barracks in full uniform, boots laced, rifle cleaned, ready. Not because someone told him to be, because sleep had become impossible. The general's words echoed in his ears. Riley's silence haunted his thoughts. And that firelit image of her dragging men from the wreckage, it looped in his head like a punishment. He wasn't trying to impress anyone anymore. He just couldn't go back to who he was when Riley arrived for PT. She raised an eyebrow. You're early. No excuse not to be, Sergeant. A beat of silence. Then a short nod. She didn't compliment him. Didn't acknowledge the change. She didn't need to. The others trickled in with sleepy eyes and sore bodies. Monroe didn't speak. He helped set up the cones, ran every drill with precision, carried the gear, kept pace even when his lungs burned. No complaints, no jokes, no need to be noticed, just work. During a water break, Lewis jogged up beside him. You all right? Monroe wiped his face, nodded. I was wrong, he said simply. That's all. Lewis smiled. She see it. She sees everything. And she did, not with praise, with pressure. Because Riley believed in pain as a teacher, and she wanted to know, was this just guilt or something deeper? So she gave him responsibility, without warning. She called him forward during gear prep. You're leading the fire team movement drills today. He blinked. That role usually went to the top-tier recruits. Yes, Sergeant, he replied. No hesitation. No. Surprise in his voice, but inside, his heart pounded. That afternoon, Monroe led. He didn't freeze, didn't stumble. He listened, adjusted, communicated. When one of the recruits twisted an ankle mid-drill, Monroe dropped beside him, helped him up, and carried part of the weight. The team made it through, intact, efficient, not flawless, but focused. From across the field, Riley watched, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away. Later, she called him aside. You think because you saw one video, you know who I am? No, Sergeant, Monroe said. I think because I watched you lead. I'm just starting to understand. She studied him, long and quiet. Pain teaches, she said, but it doesn't always stick. He met her eyes. I'm serious now, and I'll stay that way. Another silence. Then she handed him a stack of manuals. Study these. You're giving tomorrow's gear briefing. His jaw dropped slightly. Yes, Sergeant. He stood straighter, took the pages like they were made of gold. That evening, Monroe sat alone outside the barracks, the manuals spread across his knees. A small lamp overhead buzzed faintly. He mouthed words, repeated details, traced diagrams with his fingers. Riley passed once, unnoticed. She didn't interrupt. Didn't praise, but she lingered, because it wasn't about the apology anymore. It was about discipline and heart, and he was finally beginning to carry what she demanded of every recruit: the burden of responsibility. Later that night, General Coleman returned to the training grounds. He and Riley stood near the range, watching the platoon from a distance. "He seems different," the general said, eyes fixed on Monroe. Riley nodded once. Pain reached him. "You think he gets it now?" "We'll see. Respect is earned when no one's watching. And he's just started earning his own." Coleman exhaled through his nose. "He's lucky you didn't crush him." "I didn't need to," Riley said. "I gave him a mirror." The general looked at her, and he saw who he really was. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Across the field, Monroe was helping another recruit adjust their shooting stance. Quiet, patient, present, no more mocking. No more noise, just action. And Riley knew true change didn't come with an apology. When does change start? Not with a speech, not with a breakdown, with the quiet decision to stop being who you were and start becoming who you're meant to be. The next morning, Monroe was the first one up. Long before reveille, before the sun, before the routine, he stood outside the barracks in full uniform, boots laced, rifle cleaned, ready. Not because someone told him to be, because sleep had become impossible. The general's words echoed in his ears. Riley's silence haunted his thoughts, and that firelit image of her dragging men from the wreckage, it looped in his head like a punishment. He wasn't trying to impress anyone anymore. He just couldn't go back to who he was. When Riley arrived for PT, she raised an eyebrow. "You're early." "No excuse not to be, Sergeant." A beat of silence. Then a short nod. She didn't compliment him, didn't acknowledge the change. She didn't need to. The others trickled in with sleepy eyes and sore bodies. Monroe didn't speak. He helped set up the cones, ran every drill with precision, carried the gear, kept pace even when his lungs burned. No complaints, no jokes, no need to be noticed, just work. During a water break, Lewis jogged up beside him. "You all right?" Monroe wiped his face, nodded. "I was wrong," he said simply. "That's all." Lewis smiled. "She sees everything." And she did. Not with praise, with pressure. Because Riley believed in pain as a teacher. And she wanted to know, was this just guilt or something deeper? So she gave him responsibility. Without warning, she called him forward during gear prep. "You're leading the fire team movement drills today." He blinked. That role usually went to the top-tier recruits. "Yes, Sergeant," he replied. No hesitation. No surprise in his voice, but inside, his heart pounded. That afternoon, Monroe led. He didn't freeze, didn't stumble. He listened, adjusted, communicated. When one of the recruits twisted an ankle mid-drill, Monroe dropped beside him, helped him up, and carried part of the weight. The team made it through, intact, efficient, not flawless, but focused. From across the field, Riley watched, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away. Later, she called him aside. "You think because you saw one video, you know who I am?" "No, Sergeant," Monroe said. "I think because I watched you lead." "I'm just starting to understand." She studied him, long and quiet. "Pain teaches," she said. "But it doesn't always stick." He met her eyes. "I'm serious now, and I'll stay that way." Another silence. Then she handed him a stack of manuals. "Study these. You're giving tomorrow's gear briefing." His jaw dropped slightly. "Yes, Sergeant." He stood straighter, took the pages like they were made of gold. That evening, Monroe sat alone outside the barracks, the manuals spread across his knees. A small lamp overhead buzzed faintly. He mouthed words, repeated details, traced diagrams with his fingers. Riley passed once, unnoticed. She didn't interrupt. Didn't praise, but she lingered, because it wasn't about the apology anymore. It was about discipline and heart, and he was finally beginning to carry what she demanded of every recruit, the burden of responsibility. Later that night, General Coleman returned to the training grounds. He and Riley stood near the range, watching the platoon from a distance. "He seems different," the general said, eyes fixed on Monroe. Riley nodded once. Pain reached him. "You think he gets it now?" "We'll see. Respect is earned when no one's watching, and he's just started earning his own." Coleman exhaled through his nose. "He's lucky you didn't crush him." "I didn't need to," Riley said. "I gave him a mirror." The general looked at her, and he saw who he really was. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Across the field, Monroe was helping another recruit adjust their shooting stance. Quiet, patient, present. No more mocking. No more noise, just action. When? "Do you know you've changed?" Not when someone tells you, not even when you feel it. You know when you're tested and you don't fall apart. By week 7, the platoon was leaner, sharper, quieter. The loud ones had learned the cost of noise. The cocky ones had learned humility. And Jace Monroe had become one of the strongest, not because he ran the fastest, not because he lifted the most, but because he had stopped trying to prove anything to anyone except himself. During a weapons inspection, his rifle was spotless, his uniform flawless. Riley walked past without a word. That silence now? It felt like trust. Later that day, she stood before them under a pale sky streaked with thin clouds. "Tomorrow is your final field evaluation," she said. "You'll be operating in live-fire simulation. Squad leaders have been chosen, one by one." She called out names. When she reached Monroe, she didn't pause. "Squad Charlie Monroe, you lead." He blinked. For a second, he thought he'd misheard. But then the heads turned toward him, not with smirks, not with mockery, with nods, recognition. "Respect." "Yes, Sergeant," he replied, voice steady, back straight. That night, he didn't sleep. He didn't need to. He studied terrain maps, memorized call signs, assigned roles, rehearsed hand signals until they became muscle memory. This wasn't just another drill. This was a mirror. The next morning, the fog hung low over the hills. Perfect cover, perfect chaos. The field exercise began at dawn. Paint rounds, simulated gunfire, smoke bombs, radio chatter and broken patterns. Recruits moved like shadows through brush and thickets. Monroe led from the front. Checked angles, counted heads, signaled for silence. When Private Harris tripped down a shallow slope, Monroe didn't yell. He dropped beside him. "You good?" "Yeah, ankles twisted. Lean on me, we move together." They did. All the way to the extraction zone. Riley watched from the command tent, arms crossed, headset buzzing with intel. "Charlie's squad is clean," an observer said. Monroe's holding the line. She said nothing, but her eyes narrowed, studying, testing, because trust wasn't given. Not even now. It had to be earned again and again. Hours passed. Team extractions, simulated injuries, time pressure. Charlie's squad completed their mission in near record time. 0 casualties. As they returned, dirt-caked, drenched in sweat, Riley stood waiting. Monroe stepped forward. "Report, squad leader." Squad Charlie accounted for 0 lost, 1 minor injury, mission complete. "Sergeant." She didn't smile, but she nodded once. "Good. Fall in." That evening, Monroe walked to her office again, not as a recruit trying to prove himself, not as a child hoping for validation, as a soldier trying to thank the one person who had made it all possible by refusing to protect him from the truth. She looked up as he entered. "Why are you here?" "I wanted to thank you," he said, "not for the second chance, for not shielding me from my own stupidity." She leaned back, arms crossed. "And you got back up." "I didn't understand before," he said. "The scars, the silence, I thought it made you less." He swallowed. but it makes you more. There was a pause. Then Riley stood, stepped closer. You know what my CO told me after Kandahar? He shook his head. He said, the only thing more dangerous than a bullet is a man who refuses to learn. She pointed to her scars. These aren't what almost killed me. It was thinking I had nothing left to offer afterward. Monroe met her eyes. You were wrong. I know, she said. So were you. Silence. This one wasn't heavy. It was earned. She extended her hand. He shook it. You're not finished yet, she said, but you're becoming someone I'd trust in. My squad. That meant more than any medal. Later that night, the recruits sat around the fire pit, MREs in hand, trading stories. Laughing low, not loud, not careless, Monroe didn't speak much. He listened. Watched the flames dance. Watched Riley walk past. Her limbs steady, her head high. This time, no one mocked her. They straightened up as she passed, because now they knew who she was and who he was becoming. And Riley knew true change didn't come with an apology. What does it mean to stand tall? Not just with your shoulders back, but with nothing to hide, nothing to prove, just the quiet weight of everything you've learned and survived. Graduation day dawned bright. The sky stretched wide in gold and pale blue. Flags rippled gently in the breeze. Rows of folding chairs lined the parade grounds. Families gathered, nervous, proud, emotional. Somewhere in the crowd, a mother wiped her eyes. A father adjusted the brim of his cap, eyes scanning for a familiar face. Jace Monroe stood in formation. His uniform was crisp, boots polished, rifle slung just right. 8 weeks ago, he would have grinned, made a joke, said something loud to break the tension. Now he stood still, not out of fear, out of earned calm. The commanding officer approached the stage, gave a final address, short, powerful, traditional. Then came the ceremonial march. Recruits were called one by one to receive their certificates, to salute, to mark the end of something hard and the beginning of something harder. Riley stood off to the side, clipboard in hand, eyes razor sharp, her limp still there, but no longer a mystery, no longer a weakness. Her scars caught the sun-silver lines against tan skin. The breeze lifted her sleeve slightly. Another scar shimmered just above the wrist. She didn't hide them. She never had. Because what she'd survived didn't need to be hidden. It needed to be remembered. Monroe's name was called. He stepped forward. His steps weren't loud, but they were deliberate. He accepted the certificate, saluted, then turned toward the crowd in the front row. His parents watched with wide eyes. His mother cried openly. His father's jaw clenched, not from anger, but pride. They didn't yet know what had changed in him, but they would. As Monroe stepped back into formation, a murmur began in the audience, quiet at first, then spreading, "Is that her? Phoenix? From Alpha 7? More heads turned. The name drifted like smoke through the crowd, because Riley had stepped onto the field to give final commendations, and now the legend was real. General Coleman approached the microphone. He didn't speak right away. He just looked at her, then to the crowd. Most of you know her as Sergeant Dawson, he began, but some of us know her as something else. He paused. His voice dropped low. She's Phoenix, the hero of Alpha 7, the one who crawled through fire so others could live. A gasp rippled through the spectators. Some covered their mouths. Others stood without realizing it. Even the recruits who had trained under her didn't know it all. She pulled 3 soldiers from a burning Humvee after a convoy attack outside Kandahar. Took shrapnel, burns, flatlined twice. Came back after 6 months in recovery. Not to retire, not to hide, to train soldiers, to save more lives. The general looked at Riley. She doesn't wear her medals. She wears her story. And then he turned, faced Monroe. Some of you had to learn that the hard way. Every eye turned, but Monroe didn't shrink. Not anymore. He stepped forward, faced Riley, saluted. Permission to address the sergeant, sir, he asked Coleman. Nodded. Monroe turned to her fully now, voice strong enough to carry. Sergeant Dawson Phoenix. Thank you for breaking me down, for saving me twice, once in the woods, and once from myself. A breathless stillness held the moment. Then Riley returned the salute. Her voice was steady. You built yourself back, she said. I just gave you the pieces. The recruits clapped first, then the audience. Not wild, not explosive, something deeper, respectful earned when the ceremony ended. Monroe lingered near the edge of the field. Families hugged. Laughter rang out in waves, but he stood still, watching the flag wave gently in the breeze. Riley approached. Still. Think scars make someone weak? She asked. Monroe smiled faintly. No, ma'am, he said. I think they make people unforgettable. She nodded. Good answer, he hesitated. You think I've earned the right to serve beside people like you? She studied him for a long moment, then said the one thing that mattered more than any graduation speech. You've earned the right to start. And with that, she turned, walked away, her limp steady, her shadow long across the grass, and Monroe whispered it to himself, a word that meant something entirely different now. Phoenix? He wasn't saluting a call sign anymore. What does it mean to carry someone's fire? Not to wear their scars, not to imitate their silence, but to live in a way that honors both. The day after graduation, Fort Valor was quieter. Families were gone, chairs folded, flag still high. Monroe stood at the edge of the training ground, watching the track wind off toward the tree line. The same track he'd once stumbled down, cocky and blind. The same path she'd marched limping, unyielding, alone. Riley found him there. She didn't say anything at first, just stood beside him. Same uniform, same scars, same calm, heavy presence. He turned slightly toward her. Do you ever stop hearing it? He asked. She didn't pretend not to understand. The fire? She said. He nodded. The screaming, the smoke, the moments you froze, the ones you didn't, the ones you regret anyway. Riley looked forward, eyes locked on the horizon. You don't stop hearing it, she said. You learn to listen differently. He thought about that, let it sit in his chest. You said once I wasn't finished. You're not, she replied. He turned to her again. So how do I keep going? After everything? Her eyes were tired, but not empty. You keep showing up, she said. Even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. You keep leading, quietly. You carry others when they fall. You train the loud ones. You protect the scared ones. A pause. You become the person someone else is going to need in their worst moment. She looked at him fully now, and when that moment comes, because it will, you don't run. He swallowed hard. I'm scared I'll freeze again. You might, she said, but next time, you'll fight your way back faster. He didn't speak, just stood there, the wind pressing gently at his uniform. Her words pressed harder, across the field. Another group of fresh recruits began forming up, nervous, slouching, uncertain. He watched them for a long time, then turned back to Riley. I want to be an instructor one day, he said. A half smile ghosted across her lips. You'd be good at it. The ones who broke first usually are. He looked down. You think I'm ready? You think I was? She let that silence stretch, then stepped away. He watched her go. Her limp was still there, but somehow it didn't look like a limp anymore. It looked like she was dragging something invisible behind her. Memories, names, promises. The burden of the fallen, carried in silence. That night, Monroe wrote a letter home. Not about medals, not about his own transformation. He wrote about her, about Phoenix. He didn't describe her scars. He described the way she stood still when others ran. The way she never bragged, but everyone leaned forward when she spoke. He wrote about the moment he stopped mocking and started listening, about what happens when a legend stops being a story and becomes the reason you keep walking. He folded the letter carefully, set it aside. Then, alone in the quiet, he took out his gear, checked it, cleaned it, not because anyone was watching, because now he was, and across the hallway, Riley stood in her office, light from the overhead bulb catching faintly on the silver lines of her cheek. She didn't speak. She didn't need to, because some dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts, and Jace Monroe was learning what she had always known, that real strength doesn't ask for applause. It shows up in silence,